In this lesson, we're going to work on estimating the sum and difference of decimals. Basically, we just want to accomplish our objective. We want to approximate, not get an exact answer, but just ballpark, approximate the result from adding or subtracting decimals. And of course, we want to be able to do that so that we can estimate costs when we're shipping or when we're shopping. A couple of things that you, of course, have to already know how to do. You have to be able to round. You have to know how to round whole numbers and decimals. And of course, you have to be able to add or subtract whole numbers. Basically, what we're going to be looking at is just rounding at the beginning of the problem. And when we're rounding, there's a whole lot of different things you can round it to, but essentially what you want to look at is take your decimal and say, is this decimal close to 0, half, or 1? And depending on what it's close to, that's going to determine how you round. So 1.46, 1 and 46 hundredths. Is that closest to 1, 1.5, or 2? Okay, since that's approximately 1.5. And then what about 2.63? Is that closest to 2, 2.5, or 3? Well, 0.75 is the cut point. 0.75 is halfway between half and 1. So if something were above 2.75, that's going to be closer to 3. Since it's not above 2.75, that lets us know that this is approximately 2.5. And so all we're looking at now, 1.5 plus 2.5 is 5. That's 4. Oh. And so there's our approximation. It's about 4. Done. My bad. Okay, I appreciate what you just said. You just said, well, if it's above 50, that's your cut point. That's if you're rounding to 0 or 1. That's usually the cut point of 2.5. If you're only allowed to round to 2 or 3, 0.5 is the cut point where you would round up or round down. Because 0.5 is halfway between 0 and 1. Well, we are putting in a third rounding point to get a little bit better approximation. When we allow for the possibility that we're rounding to 0.5, we actually will have 2 cut points. In particular, this area of 0.25, a quarter, is halfway between 0 and 0.5. And so if you had something below 0.25, you're going to round downward to 0. But if it's above 0.25, that's when you would round upward to a half. And we've got the same thing going on here at 3/4, 0.75. At 3/4, if it's below 0.75, that's going to tell you to round downward to a half. But if it's above 0.75, that would tell you to round upward to the whole. If you choose to use these 2 cut points for rounding, you will get a more accurate approximation. But again, this is ballpark close. This is not the only way to approximate it. What you were saying of, well, let's just say round up or round down. If you're going to say 1.46, okay, if you're only allowing whole numbers, that's going to round down to 1. And for 2.63, that's going to round up to 3. 1 plus 3 is about 4. Well, you'll notice our approximation is the same. Most of the time, or a lot of the time, these 2 approximations will agree. Sometimes they won't. In general, the blue is going to be a more accurate approximation. It's going to be more reliable, but that's not the only way to do it. For this one, we'll do it both ways. We'll work on rounding with the 0.5, 2 cut points, and we'll work on the single cut point. If we allow to say 0, and I want this in blue, 0, 0.5, or 1, is 4.36 closest to 4, 4.5, or 5? That's closest to 4.5. Because it's above 4.25, that would say we could round it up to 4.5. 2.87, that would tell us to round up to 3. And so our approximation here, 4.5 plus 3, gives us a ballpark of 7.5. If we did not allow for the possibility of rounding to a 0.5, if we only used whole numbers, 4.36, that would round down to 4. 2.87 would still round up to 3, but then we get our approximation of 7. And so these two approximations do not agree with each other. They're both ballpark close. They're both approximations, they're both estimations, so they're both okay. It's just a matter of how precise do you want. Now, just for the sake of argument, to prove my point, if we actually went through and added them precisely, we get an answer of 7.23 is the exact answer. But what do you think about the approximations? This one in the blue is a little bit too high, the one in the yellow is a little bit too low, but we can still see they're both in the ballpark. They're both close. Either way you do it is acceptable. It's just a matter of which way you prefer to do it. For my piece, because I'm comfortable working with decimals, I prefer to do this piece in the blue. I like it better. It's been my experience, though, that most students prefer the one in the yellow. Because they're both acceptable, you could do it either way. Both of them are fine. And for the remainder of the video, I'm going to bounce back and forth. I'll go blue and then yellow, back and forth between the two. Okay, so looking at it with the blue method, 9.78. 78 is above 75, so that's going to round upward to 10. 5.46.
It would be 5.25.
That would be 5.5, because 46 is really close to 50. And then thinking of subtraction, 10 subtract 5.5. 4.5. That's 4.5. And there's my ballpark estimation. Using the yellow method now. 5.13. That would be just 5. 3.58. That would round up to 4. 5 subtract 4 is 1. Both methods, again, they're both acceptable. You can do it either way. Using the blue method, 3.94, going to round up to 3. 4.08 would, of course, round down to 4. That gives us our approximation of 7. Last one. And because we're still using, this is one that we're going to use the yellow method for. Approximate the total length of a cheetah. And here you get to laugh at my hideously bad cheetah drawing. Because there's a cat, mouse, and legs. Check it out. Here's a terrible drawing done super fast. You can tell it's trying to be an animal. Okay, so the body is 3.21 feet. The tail is 2.83 feet. About how long is the total cheetah? 6 foot. Well, of course, we got to stop and say, is this supposed to be rounding with addition or subtraction? This is, of course, supposed to be addition. Okay, so since this is addition, we're looking at saying 2.83 plus 3.21. And when we do our rounding, 2.83 and 3.21. 3. So 3 plus 3 is about 6 feet. Oh boy. And we're done. That finishes up all our objectives that we needed. We saw that you could round with that blue method where you allow yourself to round to a half. You could use the yellow method where you round only to whole numbers. They're both fine. You can do it either way. But whichever method you choose to use, you can still wind up answering problems like, how long is this cheetah? Ballpark close.